student would have. So I think there are those staples that every student has, but some other students, like students that we work with, then have some others, like maybe we use STAR testing more frequently, or maybe we use word analysis more frequently where we test, or we do use more word lists, or we do more running records, or we do more letter ID if that's still where we're at. So I think it all, after the battery of the every child gets this test, it really all does come down to student need and what you're working on, what your goals are.
I agree. You take those tests that every kid gets, and then that's where you gather your information, where you can say, okay, we really need to target this, and then you create, you know, like you pick assessments and create a plan around those targeted areas. So it could be kind of the kid, the group, whoever the situation. So.
Right. Once somebody's established to be able to rhyme, you don't need to be checking the rhyming. So you might leave that component off of something and do something else. But some are required, like you're saying, it's school-wide, everybody's going to get those things. And of course, some children, then you start turning over to saying, I think we need a psychological check on this. I'd like to see, can they do this? Do they have eye issues? Do they have speech issues that are complicating the picture? So sometimes those kind of things also will be tests that not everybody's going to get, but you might call for especially because you see there's a problem here in some way. So it varies on certain things.
So to what extent do the results of your assessments impact instruction?
The assessments are what guide my instruction. It's not like you just know what you're gonna. That's exactly, you pick everything, you target, because our job is to kind of, like a lot of the kids we tend to call them Swiss cheese kids, where they have little gaps and holes. So our job is to fill those holes. So the way you would do that is by targeting those specific areas.
Does anybody have anything to add to that?
I agree that that's what happens. You pick up what you get from the data and you instruct based on that. The only time I would say that that doesn't happen, perhaps, is when you have to have regular classroom, like if they're in a basal reader program, and the child is way below the level that the kids are being tested at. They still have to have the test read. They still have to take the test. You might negate that in your mind, saying, I'm not going to worry about that right now because there's no way that child's going to pass that. That's not going to inform my instruction as much as the formative things that we're finding on a deeper level below. So that's the only time I would say is when they're really not appropriate, age appropriate, at least state test even. If you have a child who's reading 2 years below state test, the state test mark is only going to tell you they're not making it. We knew that, you know, and that's not going to inform my instruction as much as if I were to give the test 2 grades below, am I seeing progress within that? So sometimes, like on the Ames web, we have done that, where we'll say, instead of, we'll give the regular grade one, but then I'll sometimes say, this 3rd grader, I'm going to check at a 2nd grade level, and I want to see that this is their growth here, because that's where you're going to see it. They're going to keep not making it at 3rd, but are we getting closer to that? And you can see it sometimes by dropping a grade. So that could make a difference, I think.
Okay, so what about communication? We all know that communication is really important, and we always try to get parents involved, and we talk about the importance of literacy in the home and everything. So in terms of your interaction and your communication with parents, what kind of communication do you do with them? Is it exclusively, you know, like progress monitoring reports, or do you communicate in other ways?
I write a newsletter for that's sent out K-5 with all the, that's sent home and is also published online. And recently I've started writing that with the math coach too. And we're really making a big push to inform parents about Common Core. The 6 shifts have been our theme for the last few months, so we're just tackling one of the shifts in ELA and one of the shifts in math, and we'll let parents know, what it means in the classroom, what it means to students, and what parents can do at home to help with that shift.
We do a lot of communication with our parents. Part of our grant that we have is kind of stipulated that we communicate often with parents. So we send home monthly newsletters with ideas that they can work on at home. because we progress monitor every 2 weeks, we report every 5 weeks. So every 5 weeks, we send home some sort of, here's a report about how your child's doing or things that we're working on. I send home nightly books with my students to read to their families, so there's a reading log that their parents need to sign. And though it's not, verbal communication with us, it's a way that I can check in that they're doing what they need to do at home, and that they can also see what their child's doing with me. In the fall, we have a book bash where we invite all of our reading department kids and their families in, and we have apple cider and donuts. And so we do kind of reading fun nights. We have a spring one where there's an ice cream social to kind of get parents to come in and pick out books with their students. We also have like reading strategies that we have to share and information. So it's a fun way to get the parents to come in. Anytime you can offer food, you might have a little bit better participation.
Serve snack and they will.
Yeah, and then emails, it's so much easier now to communicate, notes from home, phone calls, things like that all the time, so.
I also do the take-home bags for the kids. Their parents sign and return them. In our school, a lot of kids walk or their parents come and pick them up, so a lot of times you can talk to them, before and after school. You can contact them. The email's big. We also do literacy, home family reading nights, where we hold them down at the Cortland Free Library, and the kids and their parents come. I'm a member of the PTO, so that helps. That kind of automatically brings in a lot of parents. But communication is key. It really helps when the parents are on board. It sometimes can be your biggest challenge, but it helps.
I think every school makes an effort to try to reach out to parents. We have this book events, the same kind of a thing where everybody is invited, not just the kids that are the struggling readers, but just the whole school. And they give out books and they have literacy activities and things like that. So we take part in those things. And the PTO, like you're saying, it's helpful to get to know parents that way too. I sit in on parent conferences when they have the regular conference with parents. And so you put your 2 cents in, or at least you gain a lot by listening. Sometimes it's almost better to not say anything, just listen for a while. We can obviously send notes home, we can send emails to parents, we can catch them here or there or call them on the phone. I don't do as much probably as I'd like to actually, so that's something, it's hard to know where your role is a little sometimes. You have a regular classroom teacher, and there was one time in my life I was actually burned by that kind of situation where I brought something up with a parent and the teacher was not happy that I had said something and you shouldn't be saying this or that. It's like, okay. So you get into that, who has the right to say something or not say something to a parent. So I got a little gun shy after that. So I feel like I tread a little more carefully that I don't kind of overdo that now. But I believe in it. I think it's wonderful. And I send books home the same thing like that. And it's a good way to just, keep touch with parents when you have a chance to, at least, if you can.
And you've mentioned several ways of trying to get parents involved. And we've all dealt with those parents of students who really needed to be communicating with you and vice versa. And they're the ones that are the hardest to contact often. How do you motivate parents like that to become more actively involved in helping their child with literacy issues?
I really recommend introductory phone calls at the beginning of the year. It's really hard if you have a big roster, but being able to be proactive and reach out when you have nothing negative to say, is that's, I think then they'll remember you. And I think meeting in person is really important if you possibly can. I think our grant originally said that you were required to meet them at least one time in person during the year, and the second time could be, on the phone. And I always used to try tricks to, I'd address all the postcards in the beginning of the year, so all I had to do was write the comments, and it's still hard. There's just a lot going on. But I think having a child carry home a card that says something they did well, and so they are able to present that as good news to their parents, is another way to just be voice of, positive feedback.
I mean, it's something we struggle with all the time, so, what works for one parent doesn't necessarily work for another parent. It's just like a student, so, whether you're reaching out via phone call, whether you're going on a home visit, whether you're working with your principal to say, listen, we've tried, we really need to reach out together, so taking that next step. You can't make somebody really get involved, and that's kind of a hard thing. You try to get the child to encourage it a lot of times with, I really can't wait until you go home and you read this to mom, and, trying to get them excited, and hopefully they're going to pick up on the feedback that, oh, yeah, my student is really doing this, and maybe I should get a little bit more involved too. Other than that, there's definitely not a one-trick pony on that one.
That's true. One of my biggest pieces of advice would be parents love to hear when their kids are doing things well. And a lot of times by highlighting that, that's what really, then the parent will kind of keep in touch. Oh, how is so-and-so doing? And sometimes that's your way, that positive right off the bat is huge.
I think that's so true. I think you start with the good stuff, and then you have a relationship based on good stuff to be able to say, and while we're at it, this would be something you could work on that would be helpful, that kind of thing. I think it's helpful to remember sometimes you've got generational poverty going on too, and that the children that sometimes have reading problems have parents who had reading problems. And they may have had bad experiences with the school themselves. So they come in there, the last thing they want to do is have to sit down across from a teacher and have to talk about things. They're already nervous about that kind of thing, or the chip on the shoulder because of whatever. And I think the first thing you want to do is be approachable. That you don't come off like some kind of a college-educated professor person who is no slam. Sorry, no offense. No, but somebody who doesn't relate to the people in the community. I really think the first thing you want to do is be approachable. And again, you say good things about the kid that you got, and how you're thankful for this, and thanks for sending to our school, and blah, 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 and this is what we want to do, and we're trying to work on this. And oh, by the way, here's the bag we send home every week, every day, whatever, every day in our case. And this is really helpful. This is one of those things that helps kids really read well, is if they keep it going at night. If they keep going at night, that's the best thing they can do. You say that kind of thing, and the parent feels like they have hope. Maybe my child won't repeat my problems in school. So I think those kind of things, telling them to talk to their children, how important that is, the whole oral development, those are the things I think you say to parents. So they say, I can do that. I can talk to my kid. I can listen to him read every night. Those are things they can do. If you give them too big of a job, they're going to say, I can't do that. I don't have time for that or whatever. So considering who you're talking to and try to reach them the best you can that way.
When you go to parent-teacher conferences, I would really recommend watching the people who are really good at it, because you'll probably come across some teachers who are really gifted at talking to all different kinds of people, and make it a point to be around those people a lot and really watch what they do and kind of think about how they change maybe their voice and the way they sit and whatever it is. I mean, really be aware of things like, your clothing and everything can make some people feel distant from you. So.
Also watch your jargon, because sometimes as teachers,
okay.
I mean, it was funny, this past weekend I was home visiting my parents, my mom's a principal, and we were talking about, how kids need an IEP, and then you gotta go to CSE, and then you do the DR, whatever. And my dad, who's a retired teacher, he goes, do you guys hear yourselves? Listen to you. Because, what are you talking about? You're talking in letters. And, sometimes if you say your kid is struggling with phonemic awareness, some parents will be like, what is phonemic awareness? So, your child's struggling with letters and sounds. So you want to kind of watch that, when you're sending home, notes and reports and things, because, to us, what may seem like we should know that, they don't understand that, so.
Yeah, those progress reports should be something they can understand. You're right.
Late terms.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting just a little bit, and we've already touched on it a little bit, but when you are collaborating with classroom teachers, how do you get an in with a classroom teacher? I mean, obviously you don't just sit around and go, okay, I'm going to sit here in this room and I'm going to wait for a teacher to approach me for assistance, and I'll just sit here and keep all my paperwork nice and neat and my pens organized. So how do you make that, how do you establish that rapport, how do you make those connections? And you already talked a little bit about, you know, before school, after school, and that sort of thing. How else might you get an in with teachers?
When I first started teaching, I knew that I needed to let people know that they had a lot to teach me, that though, you know, I'm carrying that literacy specialist, I mean, oh my gosh, like just managing groups of kids, watching, I would comment to teachers when I learned something in their room. I would let them know, you know, what you just did in that lesson there, oh my gosh, I can't wait until I, you know, have enough experience to be able to do that. You know, let people know the expertise that you see happening in their rooms, and instead of trying to impress them with your own, that's my suggestion, I guess.
I think, again, being approachable. I mean, just as silly as smiling and saying hi in the hallway, like, I'm still amazed that there'll be people walking down the hallway who I don't know, and I'll smile and say hi, and they just keep on walking. I'm like, well, jeez. You know, so obviously just being, you know, being approachable, going into people's rooms, you know, do you need anything, just checking in, how are things going? Sooner or later, they're going to ask you for something. You know, if you're new to the district or you're new to the teachers that you're working with, sooner or later, that's going to start happening if you just keep putting yourself out there. And then as you get to know the teachers that you're working with, some teachers need more things than others. Some teachers are more than willing to plan with you and collaborate with you and work with you and co-teach with you. And some, they just want to teach in their room, and they are great for you to pull out their students. And that's okay, because it works both ways. So I really think the more you get to know them, the more you're going to know how you can support them and their students as well.
That's big. And the other thing too is not only just getting to know your teachers as people too.
Yeah.
You know, like talk about their kids and their families and, you know, their dogs, and that's so important. The other thing is, I know like one of my challenges was I was hired at 22, and in our building, I would say I'm still one of the newer people because their teachers come and they teach for 20, 30 years in the same building. So when I was first hired, a lot of people I think kind of was like, oh, here we go. But it's letting people know that I don't know everything. And I'll sit there being, I'm not sure, but we can look this up together, and knowing that you're a support for them. People appreciate that. And the other thing too is, you know, if you have some ideas that you want to share, and finding those teachers who embrace that. Like I know one of the big things with us is we were looking at intervention blocks. Before it always been like each person had their half-hour time. So we kind of scoped out a couple grades who we thought would jump on board. And then the next year, the grade above is like, well, how do they do that? We want to do that too. So then they're like, help me. And that's kind of your way to support.
In our school, we're assigned, so people don't really have a big choice. It's like, Belinda's going to be your reading person for your kids, so they don't have a choice. But when you move around, I've done first graders one year, third graders another, kindergarten, at very fifth grade one time. So in some ways, it's a small building again. We get a chance to know everybody. So at another time, somebody could seek you out and still say, we were doing this, you're not my person now, but can I ask you these questions? Or you can pop in and say, do you still have that thing that we were using? Can I borrow that? So it's a little bit more, you get to know people and whatever. But there's a tremendous difference between people and who wants your help and who really is like, I wish they weren't pulling my kids up. I wish they weren't pushing into my room. I just want to be by myself. But you are forced on them by administration. So that's tough. you know, and I have a bit of a strong personality, so I have to be careful, because I can have great ideas, but if somebody's a bit insecure as a teacher, or they like what they're doing a lot, they don't need me coming in and, well, let's not do that anymore, we're gonna do my idea.
That one
So-
doesn't work that way anymore. That's outdated.
Yeah,
We did that 10 years
well,
ago.
yeah, well, I'm the old person, so I go the other way around. But it's tough. It's tough sometimes because certain people are quite sensitive. And there's a huge difference in my relationship between some people where we can say anything and we have just such a banter back and forth, and somebody else that you've got to kind of kid glove it. And if you have something you're seeing that needs to be changed or you can think would be helpful, you've got to really tread carefully. So it really makes a difference who you're working with, and you need to know those things. And I have to tone myself down sometimes because it helps. So that's one of those things. You got to know who to tone down with and who you can just, whatever, it'll be fine.
Okay, I can relate to that. Okay, so while we're still kind of talking about communication and communicating with teachers, Dana, you've already mentioned being the go-to person for professional development. Let's shift to professional development. What types of professional development workshops have you attended recently that you found particularly useful?
I'm just today, I've started like a 4-day training for adaptive schools framework, which is, I guess you'd describe it as a way to help people work together collaboratively. So it's really like the language of discussions, and yeah, it seems really good, really valuable. Dana and I are involved in literacy leadership, professional learning community through TST BOCES. It's a regional group of not just literacy people, but classroom teachers, and it's like K-12. And this group has changed the people who've been involved, but we've probably been involved for 7 years, maybe. And it's really valuable, really, really valuable. It's one way that we keep up on, you know, the things that are coming out of Albany, and probably one reason that we got tagged by our district for a lot of professional development stuff because of that, yeah. And I guess I would just put a plug in for Seven Valleys Writing Project, which is housed here at SUNY Cortland. And I did that in the summer of 2009, and have done some, it's the local chapter of the National Teachers Writing Project, and it really is, it's a time to spend writing with other people who are teachers, and sharing your writing, and learning about how kids learn through writing. And it's just fabulous. And whether you're a teacher in training or a teacher who's teaching, it's just a really great thing to be involved in. And that's some of the best professional development I've ever done, you know, and made some fantastic friends as well.
And just for those of you who don't know, that is through David Frank in the English department. And generally, it occurs each summer. There's a program, and it's local. So if you're interested in that, we can certainly plug you into the right people for that. Sorry, that was another timeout.
Like Sarah already mentioned, I think probably the most beneficial one that we attend is the LOPLC is the acronym for it at BOCES. And not only does it kind of tell us what's coming down from Albany, but it gives us a chance to work with other teachers within other districts who are facing similar challenges or things that we can look at and work out together. Plus, we get to work with the kind of overarching literacy coach of TST BOCES, Beth Dreyer, and Jen Gondwick, who are great resources, and anytime we need anything, can then reach out to them or bring professional development to us. So that's been my focus mainly this year. I haven't been to really any other workshops other than that this year.
I'm a different BOCES, but for OCM BOCES, we have the Literacy Network team, which is the same concept. You work with the people from the state, or the network team that gets all the the dirt from the state, so to say, kind of gives you clues of what's coming before it hits. But that's a great way to collaborate with people all over your BOCES. Currently, I'm being trained in the LLI Red and Gold kits for intermediate, and that is so valuable. If anybody ever has the opportunity to go to that, I would highly recommend that. And then through Reading Recovery, it's a good one. It's through BOCES. And then for Reading Recovery, we do ongoing professional development where we do things, it's called Behind the Glass, which is you teach behind a two-way mirror. And it's sometimes terrifying, but it's really valuable. We also do cluster visits, which is where a group of teachers comes into your room and they watch you teach, either a small group or a one-on-one. But that's where you get a lot of great ideas because your colleagues can see right then and there, they're writing down ideas for you that you can implement the next day in your lesson. So that's really valuable. That's one thing. A lot of times, sometimes professional development can cost in districts. Sometimes they're hesitant to send you out, but a lot of times we have a lot of really skilled people in our own buildings that we can seek out and support. And there's a lot of value in that. So keep your classroom doors open. Welcome that. Embrace it.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
When do you do that? The cluster group of people coming in?
That's with LLI as part of the training. It's an ongoing professional
It's not during the
development.
school day then?
Yes, it is.
Oh, they'll come in?
Yep, what you do is you go in, same with Behind the Glass, you take a kid, and that's during the school day.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's very good.
Yeah.
I've done the usual professional development stuff. Some things you have to do because they sit you down in the whole school and you have to get certain things. Other ones you choose to. I've seen the co-teaching workshops I've gone to. A lot of vocabulary development because that's such a big thing right now. Kids needing to pick up more oral vocabulary. Using nonfiction books. Cognitive engagement, trying to keep everybody on task and interested and moving through the lesson, not just glazing over, that kind of a thing. I actually went to a math one because there was a lot of constructivist teaching. That was the idea of how to teach constructively with kids was something that I wanted to see more of, and this was going to have some of that good stuff in it. And it was applicable, even though it was a math one. I found it to be very helpful for that. So sometimes you just seek it out wherever you feel like those are things you're lacking in background in, or you feel like you'd like to tighten up or strengthen up, something like that. And the New York State Reading Conference, we get to go to also, and that's 2 days or 2.5 days. Someplace, and you get to see workshop after workshop after workshop, and tons of good stuff from that too. So,
What do you think are some current trends or hot topics for professional development that maybe you're conducting right now or that you're attending, in addition to what you've already mentioned?
I guess anything having to do with Common Core alignment in our district is big. We've been doing a lot of locally produced kind of professional development lately. We've done work with the annotated test questions, both math and ELA. We're going to be doing some more work with learning from student work protocols, which is looking at how a whole classroom or a whole grade level responds to the same kind of writing prompts or math prompts or whatever, and having professional discussions around that. And we've been doing a lot of math all the time.
Math all the time.
Our district really invested a lot K-5 in math professional development this year, more than ELA.
Wow. Kristen agrees.
Yeah, we're the opposite in our district.
Really?
Yeah, we're still a lot. Right now, the huge thing is RTI, response to intervention. A lot of our PDs are based around the different types of interventions because we're trying to build up our toolbox so when we get those kids, we know what to prescribe, so to say. So I would say that's probably our biggest right now, the Common Core, 6 shifts, that type of stuff.
right, yeah, the Common Core I think is a very big thing right now. Again, the oral language I think is something that seems to be getting bigger. The difference between children who have great vocabularies and they don't from their background, and how you hit that ceiling sort of like at a certain point, you can't go beyond it because you don't have the background knowledge, and how can we help that? So that's one of those things I think. there's been a lot of things that we've had to sit through that are related to the APPR stuff. So that has nothing to do with teaching, but you're having to develop your SLO, develop your LAT. You're going to have to do things like those kind of things. Data is a very big thing right now, and using your data, how to interpret your data. So those are the kinds of things that they're also talking a lot about right now. So I guess.
What about professional development texts? Have any of you, I know that right now you're doing Word Nerds, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And are there professional development texts that you just read or you're currently reading that you would recommend to everyone?
The Power of Our Words is another one. I'm doing an online book chat right now. And same thing, it's picking vocabulary that you're going to encourage your kids to learn, and how do you make those decisions between what tiers, different levels of, words and stuff like that. So those kinds of things are good. And the power of your words in the sense of also the choice words that you were talking earlier. Using the right language that encourages children to be independent rather than dependent on you, leading by the questioning you have to help them that way, and just not making you the authority and they know nothing. Instead of that, making them the ones who are, again, constructively learning, and you're the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage kind of a thing, which is hard for some of us to get off the stage. We're used to that, and to have to be on the side and let them learn. Language is a big part of that, and so framing your questions and stuff like that is helpful that way, to empower them.
Okay. How about you, ladies?
I'm trying to think like shells one. I would say the choice words. One of the ones I just finished recently, and it's a red and purple book, and it's about response. I think it's What Works, Response to Intervention.
Yeah.
Is that it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
That's a good one, especially RTI. That's stuff you will have to know with this job. I'm a big Fountas and Pinnell reader. I mean, the comprehending and fluency, I absolutely love. The prompting guides are like, I use that language all the time, and I share that with teachers. But sometimes not only just books, I like to, if you Google, and there's a lot out there. Just, sometimes when you're really struggling with something, you just Google it. You can go, like the Florida Center for Reading Research has tons of great stuff.
If you go on Amazon, there's all sorts of books, and you can see how many stars and what people are saying about them. Sometimes that's helpful too. If somebody's recommending a book and you're like, wonder if it is as good as everybody says, go find out what somebody else is saying about it. Because I have made decisions on, things for, Asperger's, that kind of a thing. I've read those kind of books, executive function, that kind of stuff, and just certain things that hits you. It's like, this sounds like what I could learn more about or something, or autism spectrum. Those kinds of things are helpful to read. Hyperactivity. That kind of stuff is helpful.
I've been trying to figure out how to keep up on the latest fiction and nonfiction for kids that's grabbing their attention, actually. So I tried, when I was a reading teacher, I always tried to have a book stand on my desk with a book that I was reading, or a read aloud that I thought was particularly great, and fill my chalk rail with the latest, greatest things that I thought, and try to really promote just reading for pleasure and talking to teachers. I know our principal loves to have books recommended to him, and people still need to be reminded that there's books out there that are really fun to read.
There's an excellent book called The Book Whisperer that I just
Yes.
finished reading.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was just talking about the power of kids reading, and sometimes we just aren't giving enough time to that. And they're not going home and reading, so when are they actually getting that, and how much of a difference it makes if they read? So if you can encourage that, so that gives some good ideas in that.
I'd second that one too. That was recommended by a third grade
It's a
teacher.
great book.
Yeah, Donald
There's a lot of
Miller, I
books.
think.
Yes.
Yeah.
She also has a blog, and she keeps up with current books.
That's right,
Gives you
yes.
information.
And
So
it's-
that's a blog, Donalyn Miller, Donalyn Miller.
Once you're done with college, you're still going to be reading. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. You're still learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep those books coming.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is a fun question. All right, so, we have these fun things that we do with children, and we think, I always like to steal people's ideas. I think it's great. So, what is your favorite reading intervention activity that you do, or maybe one or two activities that you do for a particular intervention for a child?
One of the ones I do mainly with my second graders, just because developmentally where they're at, they actually have their own timers and they can do timed rereads. So it's a book that they've read, and they get the book again, they get a timer, they get a chart, and they do their own paperwork. And so it's a less fun activity, I mean, for me, because I'm not doing a whole lot, but it's fun for them because first of all, they're playing with the timers, and for some reason that's really fun when you're 7 or 8 years old. But they're also taking on their reading, and they rate themselves as reader when they finish. And basically, they read the same passage 2 or 3 times and try to kind of beat the clock and beat their time. And I'm checking in with each of them, so they're not skipping pages and things like that. But it's a fun way for them to shave off time, hear themselves as a reader, and it takes 5 minutes to do. So it's something that you can do, often enough to make it effective. So it's not bells and whistles really fun, but it's something that they can do and they really enjoy. And the nice thing is when you do pull out a DRA2 or something like that, and that timer comes out, which they normally equate with assessing, and some kids freeze up, there's less of that because I will even hand it to them and say, go ahead and start the timer just like a reread like we're going to do. So that's a fun one.
I love the level literacy intervention. That's one of my favorites right now. I'm doing it with kindergarten, so it's a lot of, fun, different activities. Another one that we did, that was at first, it was kind of hard for me, like Road to the Code, where it's a lot of sounds, you get to play with puppets, and kind of fun. Sometimes we do those, sometimes it's kind of fun to have, I don't know, maybe if I'm just wearing a little puppet, you can do the different sounds.
Oh, I love that.
I do too. That's fun. But the level literacy intervention, I think, is really valuable. It's one of my favorites.
I think anything that makes it off the wall and crazy is good for kids. So I think that's, if you want to keep them cognitively engaged, I think you need that novelty effect as often as you can. So when something starts getting stale, switch it up. Meet under the table that day. We're going to do something down here. That kind of thing that just all of a sudden, all of a sudden they're just alert for the same activity, but suddenly you're under the table. That's really cool.